Well, welcome to another episode of our cool, critic acclaimed. Okay, I was going to try to make it cool, but I didn't. I messed up doing that. Welcome to another episode of A Real Point of View, where we talk about film and we critique the different movies that we like, and we hope that you like them and try to introduce you to some really cool films. Tonight's subject, though, is not my subject. It's not Karen D, who's the movie maven subject. It's Stephen C., the man who never picks a bad movie. It's his subject tonight. And tonight, we're talking monsters. So why monsters, Steve? What's so big about monsters, bro?
Well, I've always been a fan of monster movies. I've always been a fan of monster movies done well. Um, Monster itself can be associated in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be, a beast or a thing or something of our imagination. It can be just a human being, being malicious and to other people, to family, to anything like that. So it's a wide range subject which helps everyone associate, things that they don't like or things that they fear or things of that nature with a term. Now that doesn't mean that all monsters are bad, but most of them are. And but it's good to see how movies and writers, directors take the time to turn these creatures that we may be fearful of into almost hero-like people,
Mhm.
and that aspire to be something more than what we view them as a society. So that's why I chose monsters. There's of course, people would consider Marvel movies as big right now. People would consider the Hulk to be a monster, and no one would be wrong. So
But see, that's the idea. That's an irony, though, of sorts, isn't it?
it
Um, u-
is.
Using the Hulk because the Hulk is really the manifestation of the inner feelings of this scientist who has probably just like a lot of kids who are gifted in that realm, which are not necessarily socially gifted,
Right.
that they can't really associate or assimilate in the regular society. So they have that inner self. Well, his inner self was angry, was tough because his external self was very polite. But sadly, being a nice person sometimes is not easy in a turbulent society. And so he was mocked, he was made fun of all his life. But he utilized whatever his brain knowledge and to become this known scientist, but not necessarily acclaimed scientist. And then he comes up with a situation that he can't handle, and that interacts or affects him, I should say, to where now he turns into this hulk of a thing,
Hmm.
and his internal feeling and internal essence comes out, and yeah, the true monster within rears its ugly head, we'll say, and he turns into the
Exactly.
Hulk. And so now he is a monster, or he's a monster that we see, not the monster that we don't see.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Anything to add, Karen?
Um, no, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think those
Fair
are
enough.
cogent observations.
She's
And
just she's just mad that Maryland didn't make it to the NCAA tournament. So.
Right.
I'm not mad.
You sound upset.
Just a little bit early.
But no, it's an interesting subject. It's a deep subject. Everybody loves, not everybody. A lot of people love monster movies, and go to the theaters to see them. And of course, one of the biggest ones. Well, there are several big ones: Wolfman, Dracula, The Mummy, The Blob, uh, things like that. But also one of the major big ones coming out of the small island of Japan is Godzilla.
Right.
And our answer to Godzilla here in America being King Kong, and it's these larger than life things that float between being good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
By our perspective, even though they're really just animals.
Oh, go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, we kind of attach a personality to them,
Mm-hmm.
even though that might not even be close to what they are.
Right.
So,
I mean, you guys know I'm not a fan of horror movies. I don't generally do monster movies, but I will say that like the King Kong Godzilla genre is fascinating to me simply because of its historical roots. I mean, it was born of World War II, and I mean, King Kong wasn't, but Godzilla was, and just because of the themes about war and survival and the aftermath of war, especially nuclear war, those play out so strongly in the Godzilla genre that it really transcends the typical quote unquote monster movie to me. So that is, that's that's a monster movie that I will watch because it's just fascinating to me. And the way in which the original Godzilla movie was filmed, some of the special effects that they used and things like that were also fascinating, very interesting. So yeah, I like it. It's almost like that movie does double duty. It was entertainment, but it was also catharsis for the Japanese people, and that was just tremendously interesting.
Yeah, I remember seeing a few documentaries on Godzilla, the true story, and it really did deal with more the understanding and the reaction to the aftermath of the end of World War II in the Pacific, and how that was attributed to the essence of what Godzilla really was, or what Godzilla really meant. So, yeah, I thought that was really interesting also.
Yeah.
So, what monsters are you guys dealing with today? That's my question.
And that's a good question. Who do you want to go first?
Well, that's gonna be up to Steve.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess I'll start.
Okay.
Awesome.
Good answer.
I know, right? I'm going to talk about a character / movie that's been told over and over and over and over and over and over again, and it as a character it carries so much weight. So many people are, I'd say mysticized.
Okay.
Sure, we'll go with that. By him, and that's Dracula. Of course, based on the 1897 novel by Bram Stoker, which is where we first get a real testament to who this character is. In the novel Dracula, he's Vlad Tepes of Romania, Transylvania, wherever you want to put the area. But he was known as, of course, his name being meaning son of the dragon, which kind of added some credence. He was. This movie portrays him as a very kind of noble person, which you don't really get in very many movies, and that's why I found it very interesting. He's trying to do everything within his power to save his kingdom by doing things that he has to do in order to protect his family, his kingdom, his lands, and everything like that. And he was known as Vlad the Impaler through history because he would actually impale people on a stake and leave them there as a warning to
Ew.
anyone. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it was a warning to people for trespassing on his land. This is what I'm willing to do. This is how far I'm willing to go. And during his actual life, he was able to avoid a lot of conflicts due to his ability to be brutal. And therefore, a lot of people would not go and get, the true story of his character and who he was as a king, even though now we know so much due to ancient translating writings and stuff like that. But this movie does a good job. Luke Evans, who starred in The Hobbit, is on a TV show right now that's actually, I think it's called The Alienist.
Oh,
I
is that his
believe
name, Luke
that's,
Evans?
yeah,
Oh
Luke
yeah.
Evans.
Oh, well, you're so which Dracula movie are you talking about?
Dracula Untold.
Untold?
Yes,
Yes. He is
that
playing. He is in the Alienist, and he plays a illustrator for the New York Post.
right.
I mean, New York Times.
And but I feel like he does a good job showing an emotional and caring side of someone we would not normally associate those feelings with. Um, at one point, his land is going to get taken over. His son gets kidnapped, and he ends up climbing to a cave, seeking the help of what we would consider a vampire. It was an elder person who is just basically, if you walk into his cave, you're dead. Like he shows all the signs of a vampire, um, being that the drinking of human blood, the speed, the power, things like that. And what Vlad is trying to do is people don't fear him anymore. People don't fear what he can do, so they're willing to, try to take advantage and try to conquer his kingdom. So he's willing to do whatever it takes
Mm-hmm.
to save that. Well, he ends up making a deal with this vampire, the master vampire, which is played by Charles Dance of Game of Thrones fame. And I feel like Charles does a really good job portraying this character. For what little you see him in the movie, he
Mm-hmm.
carries himself as a domineering person and has a very big presence about himself. Like he does a good job commanding the scene when he enters, and which you would think of, a dark, dominant creature
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that a vampire would be. So he does a great job with that, but he makes a deal and says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you part of my power. If you can survive the bloodlust that comes with this for 3 days, you'll be free. And we would never know the story of Dracula. We would never know. This man would have had the power to save his kingdom, and we would not know anything beyond that. And of course, we know how that story ends.
Mm-hmm.
But just Luke Evans doing an amazing job playing Vlad, and the transformation that he undergoes. Um, you kind of feel for the pain that he's going through
Mm-hmm.
of becoming a monster that he doesn't want to become, but he knows he has to do whatever it takes.
Right.
And his willingness to go that extra length to help to save his people, to save his family, and things like that. And I feel like this is kind of it's kind of an underrated movie in my opinion when it comes to like a Dracula movie. It was supposed to be part of that new Dark Universe initiative, which of course included Tom Cruise's The Mummy, and
Mm.
which actually did very well numbers worldwide. It's just in America, it was kind of bombed. I don't mean kind of bombed. I mean it really bombed. Uh, but no, definitely a movie to go see. Definitely an alternate story that if you haven't seen the movie, you'll be interested by the fact that it is a little bit different.
Yeah, Luke Evans is a really good actor, actually, I think. And I only saw a part of this movie. I didn't see the whole thing. But the early parts of the film that I had seen after seeing the trailers, I thought was pretty good. So I was quite taken aback by the fact that it didn't do well in America. So I'm going to give it a shot. So thanks for mentioning that. For me, I go way back into the vampire realms. Um, I'm being a little bit older. I got hooked.
Twilight. I know you, Greg. I know you.
Just a little. No,
You like
no,
them.
not even.
You like
Not
them
even.
sparkly vampires.
No, no. I liked the vampire that I liked was probably one of the more ravishing vampires of all time in picturedom and filmdom. I go back to the '60s where uh, the Dracula of my youth and the Dracula who seemed to be overpowering and very, very uh, ferocious, probably is a better word than just ravenous, but ferocious. And that was Christopher Lee. Most people of this generation know Christopher Lee from as you mentioned, the Hobbit movies and Lord of the Rings. He was um, the Wizard of the White Wizard, or in the first few films, he was the White Wizard who um, chose to change his allegiance and go with uh, pure evil. Um, but Christopher Lee played Dracula, and his portrayal of Dracula was so seemingly horrendous to me that it was kind of that what's how do you say it love hate relationship. I was afraid of Dracula, but he was so intense that I was allured by him uh, through Christopher Lee, and of course the wonderful Van Helsing was played by Peter Cushing. Those movies were really, I think it was like 5 different movies that they were in together, and those movies are really scary to me. And that was my introduction to vampires and on the silver screen. But my introduction to vampires really was through television. There was a TV series in the '60s called Dark Shadows. Right, and the vampire in that TV show was Barnabas Collins, and the Collins family was kind of creepy back in the 1800s and the early 1900s, and which is where they kind of go back into the film where or the TV show where all the creatures are coming out. Like you got cousin Barnabas as a vampire and cousin Morgan as a werewolf, and I think was it Victoria? I might not have that right.
Yeah, Victoria Collins
Was a witch. No, it wasn't Victoria. It was Angelique.
Oh, Angelique was the witch. That's right.
Angelique was the witch. So, we're going back into this horror thing, but in the soap operas, which is what this was, a daytime soap opera, believe it or not, had one of the most ferocious vampires I'd ever seen.
Yes. Yep.
He was truly scary.
He was very scary.
But then we watched these movies late night on Friday nights, and I was able to see Dracula and the Curse of Dracula and all these different Dracula films with Christopher Lee. And I thought, wow, he's just as creepy and he was powerful, eloquent, and deadly. What more do you want in a creature, a true monster? Right. He had all those qualities, but just like any other vampire, they were invincible to a point. They had their Achilles heel, we'll say. And that was, somebody walking around with a wooden stake pounding their chest when they're asleep. That was enough to kill them. Just don't take the stake out. Because that bring them back.
Right.
In many of those films. So all that to get to my first movie of choice was The Underworld. And this came out in the early 2000s. And this starred Kate Beckinsale as Celine. To me, yeah, she was definitely a good-looking vampire, but more so than that, she was ridiculously deadly. And what they did in these films was to modernize the disdain between vampires and werewolves. Early on, the werewolves were brought into existence by the vampires to actually help protect them from the outside world. But the problem was they too were creatures who were in human form and changed into wolf form. But the problem here was it was like being in slavery. They were enslaved. And so the werewolves kind of got together. They formed a union. They formed a union and say we are not taking this anymore, you know. And so the movie Underworld, which came out in 2003, was um, a coming of age film where now they're using modern technology to fight each other. You know, they've got guns that shoot pure silver, the vampires do. But then the werewolves figured out a way to encapsulate pure sunlight into a shell, a bullet shell. And so now they're shooting sun at these guys and they're shooting silver at those guys.
That's so twisty.
It
I
is.
know.
It is. And even martial arts, you know, I'm a big martial arts fan for those who don't know that listening today. But even the quote unquote version of a shuriken star that they're throwing these metal stars, you know, like in Kung Fu, you see on movie in the TV show, and in these movies, it's darts and stars. Well, they've got a star that, as they throw it, it starts to the revolution starts to speed up mechanically, and it tears into the werewolves, and it's silver. So they have more than one way, you know, to get these werewolves. And the werewolves are like, you know, we're pretty tough, we're pretty big, and we like killing vampires, and vampires like killing werewolves, and that's the essence of the underworld. And there have been, I think, 4 underworlds.
It's a clash of the titans.
Oh, it is, and it's such an interesting thing to watch because now it's not just about trying to kill each other. There is a mission, there is a purpose in this first film. They're looking for an individual named Michael. And the whole essence about this is, why do both sides want Michael? What is it about Michael that's so interesting and so important that the vampires would stake out to try to catch him and the werewolves would stake out to try to catch him? And the thing is, they figured out where Michael's going to be. And ironically, they figured out at the same time where Michael's going to be. And the whole thing goes crazy, and neither side gets Michael. Because Michael's like, hey, what's going on? So he gets away, and now they got to find him. This whole movie is about finding Michael, securing Michael, and then the rest of us who are watching as the film gets more and more involved is, what is it about Michael that's so important? Well, I'm not going to give it away, in case you haven't seen it. But this is one of those really cool movies that takes the vampire realm and the werewolf realm out of its medieval state, we'll say, and brings it into a more modernistic, more futuristic ideology, and makes these vampires and werewolves even much more alluring because now they're cool. They're doing things kind of like espionage, like secret agents. It's really a real cool way to bring this into fruition. And the main vampire in all these films is Celine. Celine has the ear of the head vampire, but at the same time, she's a rebel. And then there's equally very similar characters on the werewolf side. So now you got to think about it and think to yourself, what do you really like in this war? Because humans are obviously not as important in this as they are in many other vampire films. You know, without humans, vampires can't survive because they drink the blood of humans. But in this movie, yeah, humans are important for that reason, but they're not as important as it is trying to find out Michael and get Michael captured, we'll say. So the real essence here is just a battle between two very equal, seemingly vicious foes, and the creatures that they turn into is the true monster. Not so much the turning into the creature, but the creatures they become because of one goal that they're trying to reach, one goal that they're trying to rip from the other. And it gets to be horrific with all the carnage. And it's funny, most movies, the humans again suffer the most. Not in this one. In this, it's the vampires and the werewolves. The humans are kind of like, okay, we're watching this and like scared and everything, but we're not really involved in it, so it's kind of cool.
Who do you root for, the werewolves or the vampires?
Well, see, for me,
I don't want either one of them to win, really.
Well, if you're looking at it in the essence of the film itself, just like any other film where you have your antagonist and your protagonist and all that good stuff. If you're looking at it like that, you really have to take sides on what you really like. And the irony for me is I've always been more attracted to the vampire side of things because it seemed to me it was very mysterious and they're very eloquent and they're the ones who seem like they're the wealthy ones, and the werewolves always seem to be tearing their clothes off and ripping stuff apart and seemingly kind of more haphazard and random, whereas vampires are very focused, we'll say. And I kind of thought, vampires were really kind of cool. You could be a monster, a horrific monster, without looking like the werewolves. So I've always been on the side of the vampire, to be honest with you. But especially in Underworld. Underworld, the hero of the Underworld is actually a vampire, and that's Selene. Selene is always the person she's a rebel, but she always wants to do the right thing when it comes to her kind. And trying to make sure that she's keeping her part of the bargain and trying to keep her quote unquote kind surviving. And the werewolves are trying to do what they can for that not to happen. They're trying to kill the vampires and make them extinct. So yeah, Selene's actually the hero of all the underworlds. But it is kind of a wonder world to be in all reality. But in the Underworld series of films, Selene is the star. She's the main character. So I am for her in all these films. And the vampire or the werewolves, which are called lichens in these films, you understand and you get it, but you still root for the vampires, I think.
Got it. Huh, interesting.
So what monster have you come across, Karen, that you want to give our viewers an accountance of?
Well, like Steve was saying earlier, there are all kinds of monsters. There's, they're the scary, horrible looking monsters, and they're the monsters that you don't see coming, and they're the monsters that kind of hide in plain sight. So the first movie that I want to mention is a movie called Betrayed. It was made in 1988. It stars Deborah Winger, Tom Berenger, John Hurd, John Mahoney. This is a movie about monsters that kind of hide in plain sight. Deborah Winger is an FBI agent, kind of a green FBI agent, who's given an undercover assignment. She is supposed to infiltrate this family, like in Nebraska. Because this family, or the head of the family, who's Tom Berenger, is suspected of being a terrorist, head of a group that is seeking violent overthrow of the United States government because they are white supremacists who want to completely eviscerate the country and like start it all over again in their vision of what the world should be like, or what the United States should be like, which is all white. So, and this, I bring this movie up because this movie didn't get like really awesome reviews, and it didn't do that well at the box office, but I did go to see it. I remember going to see it, and this movie kept me up for like a week afterwards. It was so freaking scary to me, because I think it was the performances which frankly weren't given enough credit in my view. Deborah Winger and Tom Berenger, particularly Tom Berenger, who played the head of this family. Tom Berenger's sort of like this farmer, and he's a military veteran. And, he's just sort of like, he just sort of gives this impression of just like this really good, like straight arrow kind of guy who's just kind of minding his own business and just trying to survive in a hard world. Trying to get the crops to grow, he's a single father trying to raise his little girl. And, what's the problem? There's no problem there at all. But Deborah Winger sort of meets up with him. Her undercover identity is that she's some sort of migrant worker who just kind of drops in there. And she meets up with Tom Berenger, and the problem is that she's attracted to him because back in 1988, he was a hunk, I must say. He was on All My Children, so I've always had like a soft spot for Tom Berenger. But she, so she kind of falls in love with him because, I mean, he just comes across as this real honorable guy, and he is, until he starts sort of telling her, well, there are these things that, we do because, I'm really concerned about the country, and I'm concerned about the direction the country's going in, and, and we're under siege and all this other stuff. So then she gets this bird's eye view into what they do, which is they go around lynching people. They go around, and in fact, the movie opens with the killing of a left-wing DJ, a Jewish man. He was, lynched and killed with graffiti all over his body from reflecting the name of this group. That's how the case gets started. So anyway, Deborah Winger, who's this green FBI agent, is getting involved with this family. And she's like, Tom Berenger comes across as such a good guy. She's like, well, maybe they're terrorists here, but it can't be him, and it can't be his family because they're doing everything right. They're really pursuing the American dream in the like the best way possible. And her superiors back in Washington are going, what are you, nuts? No, he's the guy. And she's like, no. And you're like, no, he's really the guy. So they go back and forth, and then she gets a real bird's eye view into what's going on. And there's this really chilling scene to me where his little girl is in like helping her grandmother bake a cake. And she talks about how and Deborah Winger said something like, oh, well, what's your favorite cake? She's like, oh, I like, white cake, and the cake gets finished. She's like, oh, this is the whitest cake and with the whitest icing in the whitest world, or something like that. And she's just so thrilled about everything being white. It was like, I haven't been able to eat a white cake with white icing since. But anyway, so these people are just like singularly focused. I mean, I don't even think that they wear like dark clothing. They only wear like white clothing. So it's, so they're Klansmen. I mean, they're white supremacists, but they don't wear the hoods, and they walk amongst us. And especially I mean, today, I guess, I don't know. This movie just resonates with me a little bit simply because of the times that we're in these days. And the people in this movie hated everybody who wasn't a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So they were after Muslims, they were after Jews, they were after Black people, they were after Catholics. They were just, I mean, just any and everybody. They just hated everybody. And the hatred was so visceral and so unreasoning. And that's what, to me, just got to me as a viewer of the movie and as, one of their potential targets. It's like their hatred was just so singular and just so deep-seated. And there's like, it was so deep-seated. It's like you couldn't envision having a conversation with any of these people and sort of like trying to explain to them why they're such idiots, or how wrong their belief system is. You couldn't even begin to have that conversation because it was like in their DNA, this kind of hatred. And it was because of what, they teach their children to only like, white things and to only like eat white cake and only have grits for breakfast or whatever it is. So maybe not grits, but, so that's what to me was scary. So to me, this was a horror movie. It wasn't pitched as a horror movie and, but this was a horror movie.
With very apparent monsters.
Yes.
I mean, this movie makes Dracula look tame.
Exactly.
I
Have you seen Christopher Lee?
I just wanted to see Greg's face.
No, I'm just saying, have you seen Christopher Lee? Ain't nothing tame in that baby.
Yeah, well, watch Betrayed and you just might change your mind.
Actually, I've seen Betrayed. Because I'm a Tom Berenger fan.
Right. So,
and I didn't remember the movie very well because it was a long time ago when I saw it. But maybe I'll revisit it just to see how it stood up test of time.
Yeah, this is a 30-year-old movie.
Yeah.
So, at least Dracula wasn't biased.
That's true.
He bit anybody he could find.
Yep, everybody. Guess what? Everyone dies.
And in The Wizard of Oz, they were looking for Toto. Now you know.
Yep.
Dracula didn't care.
Dracula cared.
Said,
let's be honest.
I've come to sell you some insurance. Good.
Good. Step into my parlor.
Well, I like insurance salesmen.
Well, like I was saying, the movie didn't get great reviews, and one of the things that some critics, sort of ding the movie for was just Deborah, the characterization for Deborah Winger's character, because they had her as this green sort of FBI agent, and it's like, okay, come on, wait a minute. If she's that green, why the heck would you send her on an undercover agent into the middle of Nebraska, by the way, and by herself, and she was also involved with her boss, who was played by the late John Hurd. So he's the one that sends her out on this undercover mission. It's like, that doesn't even make sense.
I was going to say, what does that actually tell you?
Well, you know what it tells me?
What?
Horror movie. Horror movie. If that's how you know this movie actually is a horror movie, is because that is like numero uno horror movie trope.
Well, that's true. That's true. You always have the naive,
We're gonna send a completely unqualified person into a completely dangerous situation in which we know there's a 90% chance they're not gonna make it back by.
Right. But then somehow they do, or maybe they don't.
Yes.
And I'm thinking I'm thinking John Hurt's character was thinking, hey, I can end this affair right now. Let's send Sally.
My wife will never know. My wife never need know. Right. So it's like, what? It's like, come on. But in my opinion, Deborah Winger does do a good job of elevating the situation and elevating the characters. So she comes off as more multifaceted than simply some boob from, some boob who literally fell off the turnip truck and into, the farm. She comes across as more intelligent and more insightful, naive, yes, because she falls in love with the object of her investigation, which is, a total no-no. But except for that, but she did great, so.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, that's funny though. It's
That
like
is amazing.
because think about it, she's FBI, so it's not like she's stupid. She's FBI, so you can't be stupid to be FBI. But then
Oh.
there's the naivete of, well, you haven't had any field exercise. Let's give you one of the hardest things that ever on the
Right.
earth to do, just to get you some experience.
Yeah,
It's called hazing.
exactly. Yeah.
It's called hazing, Greg.
Hey,
that's
and then now
exactly
you
what
know
it's
why you get
called.
away with hating, Steve.
Right.
This is just wrong.
Oh my god. That's
So, what other?
terrifying.
Do you have a traditional monster? Another traditional monster, Steve, or do you have a non-traditional monster like Karen alluded to a moment ago?
Um, I have a traditional. I got a traditional monster. As a matter of fact, I got a bunch of traditional monsters.
All right.
Like a load of traditional monsters. There's a movie that's out there that I feel is one of the most underrated horror comedy movies based on its box office. Now, as reception when it came out to DVD, Blu-ray, and all that stuff, this movie exploded
Hmm.
because people absolutely love it. It's kind of a cult styled movie now where it just didn't have that mainstream success, and then all of a sudden, which is funny because that's the ending of this movie too. Um, so basically, the movie's called Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the
The
Woods.
Cabin in the Woods, and it just sounds so generic when you see it, when you watch the trailers for it. Everything about it seems generic, and it is anything but generic. Basically, what goes on is the movie starts with a very high tech facility and some senior technicians that are riding around on the little golf cart talking about an operation that's got to go on. After an operation that was undertaken in one of its counterparts in Stockholm had just ended in failure. What we get from there is the generic start to a horror movie of college students that are going to spend their weekend at a deserted cabin, which happens to be in the woods, and they all have the they all have uh, these technicians actually give them intoxicating, mind-altering drugs while they're at it, so they just follow into every trope. You know, the high libido, the weird kid, the athlete, the the nerd, the virgin girl, and all that stuff. It carries all the trope, and it just they go to this cabin, they find all these bizarre objects, and they're looking at all these objects, and finally the one girl ends up reading from a journal because when you open a book that's in a cabin, you want to read from it. Like, oh, this seems interesting. This doesn't seem like it's in our language either. Hey, guess what? I'm gonna read it because that sounds like just the greatest idea ever. What they end up doing is they end up resurrecting a zombified family.
All righty.
As
Seriously?
this, no. So we got zombies,
Of course
but
we
what they,
do.
of course we do, but we don't have just zombies. There's mutants in this movie. There's witches in this movie. There's wraiths in this movie. There's a basilisk in this movie. There's a unicorn in this movie.
Oh my god.
There's an evil killer clown. There's a killer robot. There's a giant werewolf. There's a merman.
A merman.
A merman.
A merman.
Well, here's the thing. He's a predecessor of the king, who ended up in the movie. What is it? The just won the Academy Award. The Shape of Water.
Yeah.
His great grandson.
Yeah, that would be a merman.
That'd be a merman.
But not to really ruin the movie, it's got some twists and turns that you won't see coming. But the deaths of all the characters are meant to be on the horror comedy scale. The how the high tech facility plays into the kids in the cabin in the woods and what they're trying to do, because there's always got to be some virgin sacrifice that's got to happen with the main character girl, and then all the characters carry the archetype of the fool, the virgin, the scholar, the athlete, the girl that just wants to sleep with everybody, that one.
Yep.
And it's just the way they play it out is so funny. But the underlying tone is, if everything doesn't go correctly with the situation that's going on, all of humanity dies.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Glad there wasn't any burden on anybody's shoulders or anything.
No, but here's the thing. They don't know this.
Oh, that's worse.
Yeah, these kids that are going to die in this cabin have no idea what's going on. They're just in a horror movie. So you get the background of what's going on in the facility and the foreground of what's going on with these kids in this horror movie, and then the fact that they unleash all of these different monsters all over everywhere. At one point, they're being chased by a giant bat.
Oh, so Lord.
The movie goes the complete extra mile of doing just all these insane things. And it starts off like a generic horror movie with that little nuance in it, and then it just keeps getting better as it goes. And I can see where the box office didn't have as much draw for this movie, because they don't tell you. They wanted you to come see this movie expecting it to be a generic horror movie. Generic, right. Whatever.
Which I guess killed the box office, because it wasn't advertised for all the coolness that it is, obviously.
This movie is anything but a generic horror movie. And I feel like it's so underrated because it does something so different than what you really expect to be going on. And it's must see. But the fact that it has everything in this movie. I mean, it's got a killer unicorn.
And we know they never...
A killer unicorn?
Well,
here's a killer unicorn.
It's got to, because obviously this is where Noah's boat must have sailed off into the ocean or into the sea, because the unicorn was left behind.
Exactly. I mean, it's got a little bit of everything.
They made a song about it.
What? Just because they made a song about it doesn't mean you need to bring it up.
I'm just saying that they make a song about it. It's probably true.
The internet hasn't let me down yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
And you go to YouTube and listen to that song.
Oh my gosh.
You know what? I say it was a box office bomb, but it really wasn't. Budget was $30 million. It made 66.
Hey, it doubled its money. That's not bad.
So, but if you have not seen this, Karen, I know you don't like horror movies at all. I know you're not a fan.
Yeah.
But I honestly would like you to give this movie a try. Just a try. And because I feel like by the end of it, that the actual horror aspects of it won't even matter to you. That you will just be enjoying yourself because it'll just be so different.
Huh. Possibly.
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible, Steve.
Oh, but
Interesting.
the two main stars that I notice on it are Sigourney and Weaver is in it, and Chris Hemsworth is in it.
Really?
Really?
Yep.
Well, you got attention that way. That was good.
I
It
love
came out.
Sigourney Weaver.
It
You
came
should have
out in
just started with
2012.
that, Steve.
Sorry,
Talk about
it
burying
came
the
out.
lead.
Hey, they buried the movie in the trailer.
Well, that's true.
There you go.
But yes,
Well,
seriously, check it out.
I like to throw in my next monster. This is a monster that once you see this film, it's going to make you think about a lot of different things. But one of the things that it wants to make you think about is whether or not you want to have kids. The movie that I'm talking about is The Bad Seed. Now, I think Dracula was pretty horrible. I think Werewolf, yeah, Godzilla, King Kong, Mothra. I mean, we could go on and on and on. But I don't think any of them would have survived hanging out with little Miss Pinmark in The Bad Seed. We're talking, in fact, I need to read this to you. This is the brief in IMDb about what this movie is about. A housewife suspects that her seemingly perfect 8-year-old daughter is a heartless killer.
Sounds like an Oscar movie to me.
Well, I'm just going to say to you here, in this film, what's it, McCormick? What is her name? Patty McCormick plays this little 8-year-old evil. On a scale from 1 to 10, when it comes to the scale of 1 to 10 about evil incarnate, this girl is an 11.7 on the evil
amazing.
On the evil Richter scale. She sucks you in. She's like a succubus. She sucks you in, and allures you in, and you just don't know what you're getting into. All I had to say is the little boy's shoe is what they found. Now where's the little boy? Yet she hasn't seen the little boy. She plays with the little boy at school. She hasn't seen the little boy, but somehow the little boy's property is in her room. Coincidence?
I think
not.
The Bad Seed, as the description describes, is a little girl who so wants to get her way and have things how she wants it to be, that she is one of the most devastating liars.
Oh my God.
One of the most horrendous killers. All for self. What's the word? What did I want to use? Well, all for selfish reasons. She'll lie about her mother, her uncle, her dad, her anybody. She'll lie to her mother. Oh, and then she gives you the whiny tears. Oh, mommy, no one likes me. The kids won't play with me. That's because every kid who walks with you disappears.
Yeah, but she was surrounded by the stupidest adults on God's green earth. Come on.
I
mean, her mother.
Here's the thing. Yeah, her mom of all people. But
yeah, she was an idiot.
But the whole thing is, this little girl, was fooling everybody. Yeah, mom wasn't real.
Only because these people are the dumbest people on God's green earth. Are you kidding me?
Because they all were like, oh, she's so precious. And they like these little precious girls. And they had their own ideology of what a little girl of preciousness should be. And all she did was, hey, okay, this is what you think I should be. I'm going to be that because I'm going to get everything I want. See, here's the making of Al Capone's little sister. But, if Al Capone had known that she existed, she'd have been in his council, the concierge. That's how bad this chick was. This is one of the worst monsters I've ever seen in film, and I'm not even kidding.
Well,
This
what did
kid was
she want
horrific.
though? I mean, she wanted. I mean, you said she wanted to get everything she wanted. What was it that she wanted? Because she just went around indiscriminately killing people. To what end? That's what I didn't get.
Well, as I was watching it, because I've seen it probably about 5 times now, and I think my wife has seen it many more times than that. But the thing about her was they were petty things. They were little things that a little 8-year-old girl would want or have. If the little boy had shoes she liked, she wanted his little shoes. If the little boy had a nice ring, or she wanted those things. The custodial person on the grounds where she lived said he would promise her this thing, and she said, "Well," he said, "if you do this, you can have that." And he was kidding with her. He was just messing with her. Well, he should not have messed with her because she expected to get her reward for doing what you asked her to do.
Oh God!
And woe be it for this guy not to do what she asked him, what she was expecting to get in return for doing you a favor. He's like, "Oh, you're a little girl. You don't know anything. I just did that for fun." She's like, "This is not."
Well, she really did not have a sense of humor, I must say.
Not even in the least. Okay. In fact, this whole movie, you're thinking, if I could just take that little girl by her little pigtails, take her outside. Of course, I would have to have a whole bunch of people with me because she's so evil that she might find a way to get free and stab you in the back. She was not beyond stabbing you in the back.
Yeah.
She was not beyond this movie. Okay.
It sounded like she really graduated from seed into like plant. Like she was like the bad plant.
I'm thinking more like the bad poison ivy vine. That's what she was. And I don't know what's the worst tree. She was the Venus flytrap of trees. I mean, oh my goodness. You watch this film, you're going to sit there like, oh my goodness, she's 8.
She's 8, but she was so successful because she was surrounded by such incredibly stupid people. I'm sorry. I mean, come on. No one has like a sense of survival here. No one gets the EBGB. She was kind of creepy for an 8-year-old. I mean, Jiminy Cricket.
If you sat there and listened to her talk, you would think, she's maniacal.
Yeah, but nobody got that. Just because she was blonde, it's like, okay, can you?
It's like they said. It's like they said she's 8, so she's got to be wonderful. She's got to be good. No, she was none of those things. Not even close.
She wouldn't need to find the back of my hand.
Oh, I'm telling you, Steve. If you try to slap her with the back of your hand, her look would scare you so much.
She would find a way to get you.
And the next thing you know, you'd be asleep, and you wake up the next morning, and you wouldn't have felt the pain when she cut your hand off because she would have put something on there to make sure that it would numb the pain. But yet you would not have a hand; you'd have a nub. I'm telling you, this was an evil chick. Let's see.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
I'm telling you, this is one of the most frightening movies because she was 8 years old. One of the most frightening movies I've ever seen, and they had the nerve that they're making a remake.
Oh no, really? Because sorry, the original Bad Seed was. They got it right. They should not remake this movie.
They did. It's actually a very good movie. It's just a sad movie because it's a child. And I guess we always put children, supposedly, quote unquote, in their place, put kids aside. This is not that chick. She's not that person. You weren't putting her aside to nothing.
This is not that girl. If you did,
you better look at your other side because it's going to be missing. That's how evil this chick was. Okay, I exaggerate a little bit. She was really bad. So the evil seed is my monster. Of all the monsters, she's the most frightening.
Interesting.
That is terrifying.
It is. She was. All you have to do is count the bodies as she walked. Count the bodies that are missing.
Oh my God.
I'm assuming like she killed a lot of people in this movie for you to have this.
No, she didn't kill a lot of people, but she killed them well.
Right.
She killed them well and had no remorse. None.
Oh my God. That is terrifying.
That's the most terrifying part. No remorse whatsoever. In fact, she almost blamed them for giving her issues.
You didn't give me the thing. Throat slit.
You know what? With the little boy, I think it had to do with like a spelling bee or something. He won, and he should have given her. She should have gotten the prize instead of him, and so she decided she wanted that prize so badly. She'd studied for it, and she should have won. And there was no way he should have won. And the next thing you know, the boy's missing.
No,
but
it's not. He's dead.
But the prize is in her house.
Well, he doesn't need it. He doesn't need it where she sent him. He's
I know.
Not gonna need
she lied and said that she won, and then the teacher calls and says she didn't win, and they're looking for the little boy. And she's like, "But mommy, I did win." And it's like the teacher said the little boy won. She goes, "Well, he gave it to me." Well, did you win or did he give it to you?
I won when he gave it to me. After I murdered him, he gave it to me. So he gave it to me that I murdered him, and so I won.
That's what we say. I am still the victor. When it's all said and done, I am the victor. Exactly.
I win.
So I just want to know what happened to the groundskeeper. I am the victor. And that was a man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. I'll leave it alone. Wash my hands of it. Me and Pumpkin's Pilot, wash your hands of it.
Oh,
okay. So anyway, go see The Bad Seed. If you haven't seen The Bad Seed, try to see the original before they make the remake, which is, I think, the next few years.
When was the original made? Was it? I know. I want to say 1959.
Let me look at that real quick here. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I think it was like 56, 57. It was 56.
Oh, 56. Okay.
So 1956, The Bad Seed. They actually remade it a few times, but I think they're making it like a major motion picture to be in the major theaters. I think it was like a TV version of it too. Yep, it was. TV version in 1985.
Yeah, that was not very good.
Not very good. And because, like you said, the original is like stellar.
Yeah, they got it right. They got it right the first time.
They did.
Well, I guess I'll wrap things up with my last pick of the evening, and that is an absolute classic of a monster movie called The Silence of the Lambs, made in 1991, starring Anthony Hopkins, Jodie Foster. Interesting that you should, make that sound, because it was an Oscar-nominated picture for Best Sound during the 1992 awards. And of the movies, this one has, I would say, the best pedigree, as it won Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Screenplay from material previously produced or published, and was an Oscar nominee for Best Film Editing and Best Sound. So quite a pedigree. And at the time that this movie came out, it not only was highly regarded by the critics, it also did boffo box office, as they say. This was like the must-see picture of 1991. You had to go see. And I remember people just saying, you have to go see this movie. And it's like, well, it's really scary. You have to go see it anyway. It's awesome. It's really, really scary. And don't go by yourself and don't go home alone. But it's really awesome. You really need to see this movie. So
and it was.
It's a very well done movie. Jonathan Demme won Best Director. I forgot about that. So Jonathan Demme wins Best Director for The Silence of the Lambs. So just a really brilliant movie, and just the movie, the kind of movie that does what the best monster slash horror movies do. It just gets under your skin and it doesn't leave you alone. So of course the movie starts out, it's kind of interesting how Steve mentioned that, you have these, these sort of this naive person who sort of is placed in a dangerous, like this incredibly dangerous situation. Well, we have that classic sort of approach with this movie. We have Jodie Foster, who plays, an FBI agent. Sound familiar?
Sounds familiar.
And, she's in training at Quantico, in Quantico, Virginia, and she's pulled off to help investigate, or not to help investigate, but to help sort of interview this incredibly just dangerous man, to help profile him. He's in this prison that just is like really beyond the pale. I mean, it's like, glass that's, completely shatterproof, thick glass, no windows, completely isolated from any and everything. I mean, there's no way that he can interact with any prisoners, and even just feeding him is really sort of, I mean, like giving him food is just, you're kind of taking your life in your hands when you're handing the food through the slot, because he just has a really good way of just, I don't know, managing to get you. So she
cranberry sauce,
right, and Chianti, right. So she's sent off to interview him, and he in a true monster style doesn't come across. He comes across as, for a monster, somebody pretty reasonable. It's like you see him in this prison, in this completely, bizarre setup that's impregnable, basically. And he's got like a mask around his face with, just, I mean, like a leather mask that just completely covers him so that he can't, I guess, bite people. But then when the mask comes off and she's interviewing him, he seems, relatively engaging. I mean, he's erudite, he's articulate, he's well read, seems to be thoughtful, I mean, so it's like, so what the hell could he possibly be in for? I mean, this seems like an eminently reasonable person, but he's not. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a movie. And and when she's interviewing him, he turns the tables and gets under her skin and starts interviewing her, because he sees her soft underbelly parts, like her bad childhood and her, the mistake, the mistakes that she's made and in her fears. He finds out far more about her than she finds out about him, which is the way that movies often get to turn the tables. And in the monster, that's the true monstrous thing. It's like, you've got right and justice, and you've got the full weight of the FBI behind you. Apparently they don't have any agents with actual experience, so
as we have already seen,
right? So
the full weight is the lightweight, sounds like.
Right. So they send these people in, and it's like, and then they're completely just outclassed by the monster, who has way more experience. So, so that's kind of interesting. But then there's also just this other sort of plot about the cool thing about The Silence of the Lambs is that it was actually filmed in Maryland, and it sort of uses Maryland landmarks, like, you know, like there's a whole, you know, mental health care system and mental health care hospitals like Spring Grove and others. And so this Baltimore hospital for the insane was sort of like that's kind of stood in their stead. So, but parts of the movie were definitely filmed in Maryland. And there's also references to Johns Hopkins University and stuff like that. So for people who are Maryland fans, you know, there's a lot to sort of like about this, you know, really sinister film. But anyway, so there's this other plot about the doctor who's head of the hospital for the insane and what's going on with him. And Anthony Hopkins' character does not like this doctor. And
of course not.
You know, does he have good reason? Who's the real monster here? And that's one of the other questions that that this movie brings up. You've got Anthony Hopkins, who's learned, but, you know, has an eating disorder. And then you've got this doctor who has taken an oath to first do no harm and to help people, to help the sick become well. Is he really the person that he seems to be? That's one of the questions that's brought up. And then there's also a kidnapping of a senator's daughter that throws everything awry. And they end up going back to Anthony Hopkins' character. He's already rebuffed everybody. And they're like, well, we can't deal with him. We're going to just go on without him. But then they get back to him because they need to find the senator's daughter before something horrible happens to her. And he kind of cuts a deal. But then the doctor comes back and cuts another deal. But then Anthony Hopkins finds a way, or the character finds a way to sort of like turn that deal on its head. And then he escapes the prison, which is not quite the end. So I won't go into what the end is. But anyway, it's a really, I mean, this movie also kept me up late at night because it's really, I mean, the special effects are horrible because they're kind of understated. And I think Jonathan Demme and his special effects team did a really good job. They excelled in this by sort of letting the mind's eye fill in the gaps. Mm-hmm. So when you had situations of him killing, of like the Anthony Hopkins character killing people, or other characters killing people or dismembering or maiming or whatever, you didn't have the movie giving you every single detail.
Right.
The movie sort of gave you just enough so that your mind just immediately begins to race, and it fills in all the gaps. And it's far more horrible than anything that could have been shown. So the movie was brilliant at that. And by saying that, I don't mean to imply that somehow they weren't showing things. They showed a lot, and it scared the crap out of me, and it just really grossed me out. But they still didn't show everything they could have shown, which got my mind to continuing down the rabbit hole and becoming even more and more horrified. And it's like, oh my God. So.
Well, I don't know about you, but they had me at Clarice.
Oh, as soon as he said it the first time.
Yeah, I was like, this is going to be really strange.
Yeah, he definitely commanded your attention from the second he opened his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good actor. I always liked him as an actor in most everything I've ever seen. I just call him Sir now. He's just Sir.
Well, and Anthony Hopkins did a lot of preparation. He visited prisons. He studied convicted murderers. He went to court hearings. He studied the files of serial killers to prep for the Hannibal Lecter role. And and just another little bit of trivia. I mean, the acting came across. I mean, there's a real sort of, I think, also chemistry between Jodie Foster's character and Anthony Hopkins' character, which was very critical to the movie.
Right.
And not at all in a sexual kind of way, but just in that there was an alliance, like there was some deep dark parts that they shared, or there was some sharing going on in terms of like a symmetry in terms of personality, and so that is even more horrifying. I mean, it would be much simpler if you were just completely repulsed, but you're not. You're attracted. You're a moth to the flame. So there was one part of the movie. Jodie Foster said later that in her first meeting between Clarice Starling and Hannibal Lecter, Lecter made fun of her Southern accent, which Jodie Foster actually has a Southern accent. So her reaction was so horrific that she felt personally attacked. And she had like this really genuine reaction of horror, because it's like, what the hell? How dare you? And then she later thanked Anthony Hopkins, because that, was like a brilliant way to just like get her out of her head, and like, actually, she became Clarice. So it was like interesting, very interesting. But anyway,
it's a really good.
It's an excellent movie. It's one of, and I wouldn't watch it alone. I wouldn't watch it at night by yourself, and but it's definitely worth watching.
Now, ironically, Anthony Hopkins, again, another actor I really love to watch in film. I really liked him in the Mark of Zorro too, as the quote unquote elder
father, right?
But a movie that I came across from Anthony Hopkins, the first movie I came across was a horror movie. It's called Magic. And in that movie, he's a ventriloquist, and the puppet actually takes over, more or less, that kind of film. And those kind of films seem to be cliche sometimes, but in that movie, it was so creepy. That's the one that kept me up. Was Magic, and Anthony Hopkins was ridiculously good in that film. So much so that I too lost sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Silence of the Lambs is one of the better films out there.
And let me just mention something else. Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs was only on screen for less than 25 minutes.
Wow. That tells you something there.
That's it. It's the second shortest performance to ever win an Academy Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role. David Niven wins first prize for his 1958 performance in a movie called Separate Tables, in which he was only on screen for 33 minutes and 39 seconds. Anthony Hopkins was 24 minutes and 52 seconds.
That's
but
amazing.
if you've seen Silence of the Lambs and you reflect upon it, it's hard to remember that he was only on screen for not even half an hour, because his presence permeates the entire film from beginning to end.
That's interesting. It reminded me of a film that was nominated for an Academy Award and also the Best Supporting Actress in a film. And it just goes to show you that it's not so much the amount of time, but the content of the performance itself. And I'm speaking of Viola Davis in Doubt. She was nominated for such a small, she wasn't on screen very long either throughout that film, but it was poignant. It was necessary. It had an effect. And that was the first movie of her ugly cries that she's been known for of late. And it was so impactful. And you felt her sorrow in that movie. And that in itself with Anthony Hopkins in the situation. You don't have to be in the whole movie to affect the movie's essence and outcome, and it just goes to show you. Because had you not said that, I would not have remembered that he wasn't in the whole movie.
Yep, he wasn't.
Because it felt like he was. It felt like his presence was there the whole time.
It really did.
And that's really what affected Clarice throughout the film as well, and how she thought about things. Hannibal Lecter was totally in her head.
Yep.
Totally.
Yep. And the character that Hannibal Lecter is actually a composite of real life serial killers, including Ted Bundy and Jane Gum, not Jane Gum, Ed Gein.
Ed Gein.
Ed Gein, oops.
His name is Edward Gein.
And I don't even want to know how you know that. And Gary.
I was thinking the same thing.
And Gary Heidnick, who's
the character, the true character of Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The whole aspect of it is based on Edward Gein.
Oh.
Not something we want to get into on this channel, especially if Karen wants to sleep tonight.
Yep.
And you two too. You all need to sleep.
Oh, well, here's the thing. Just fine knowing the knowledge that I have of what he did to people.
So I don't normally recommend a TV series to people because I know we're getting kind of long in the tooth and we're going to get out of here in a minute. Steve alluded to it earlier. I think one of the better, not great, but one of the better TV series out there right now is The Alienist. I think people should see that.
Okay, where can they find it?
Cool.
Alienist is actually a TNT television show.
Oh, okay.
TV might be if you're into streaming, maybe Hulu, something like that. But also try the TNT online streaming. But it is a really good series, and it basically takes place in the early 1900s, and Theodore Roosevelt is the police commissioner. So way before he's president, he's portrayed as a police commissioner in this film.
Teddy Roosevelt was president in the early 1900s.
No, my point is that this is prior to him.
This is before that.
This is when he's a young man.
Then it would have had to have been in the 1800s because he was president in the early 1900s. I mean, in real life, he was president in the.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
I know a lot about Teddy Roosevelt. It's not that. It's just I don't know the exact date. I was just trying to give you an idea of the era, the time frame. But yeah, late 1800s, early 1900s, that realm. There are no cars yet, so I guess it is the late 1800s. But it's a really interesting television show, and I recommend it to anyone to watch it. And then there's a Netflix Godless. Gotta watch that. I don't care if you like Westerns or not. This is a very important miniseries.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, on a scale from 1 to 10, it's a 12 to me.
Wow. I've never heard you give anything a 12 before.
This is a 12. It's funny. The first few minutes of it, I thought, well, I'll give it a few more minutes. Oh, wasn't I so happy I gave it a few more minutes? Because after that, it never slowed down. It just got better and better and better, and it got better. And even the ending, it got better. It was a good ending. Not a great ending, but it was a good ending. And
well, we know you're hard on endings.
Endings are hard on me, but the TV show itself as a whole, oh my goodness, it's amazing. It is amazing. It's on Netflix.
Okay, I've got Netflix. I can check it out.
So Godless is
to talk about.
Go for it, Steve.
April 13th, I believe is the date. Yep, April 13th.
Friday the 13th.
Monsters. Is it Friday the 13th?
Yep.
Oh, awesome. We've been talking about monster movies. We've been doing all this. The Rock's new movie Rampage comes out.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's based on a 1986 video game in which you get to play as either a gorilla, a wolf, or a gigantic crocodile that go around just terrorizing everything. I feel like this may go down, but particularly because it's The Rock, and he does such a really good job with everything he touches so far. And
It looks
of
really
course,
good. I've seen trailers.
Naomi Harris is in it.
Yep.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan is in it also.
Yep.
Oh, our cousin.
Jeff.
Yep.
Jeffy D. That's what we call him.
But I want to make sure to.
And we've actually met that gorilla.
Because
he brought him over one time after they did some shooting.
That's awesome.
Oh.
But I want to make mention of this movie. I feel like it's going to be amazing. I feel like it's going to go down in the very low hierarchy of best video game movies.
Oh, wow.
Hierarchy. You might be right, because it really
like
looks good.
There's like an easy 5, and that's it.
Oh, great. Lovely.
So I wanted to make mention of that before we get out of here.
Good job. Good job. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we always do, we get a little wordy, but we hope you enjoy our banter. Thanks again for watching us here on A Real Point of View. We appreciate you, and I hope that you kind of hang out with us as often as you can on our YouTube channel at A Real Point of View. And listen to some of our archive shows and hopefully get some good ideas for some really good movies to watch. So thanks again for hanging out with us here on A Real Point of View. And we'll say our good nights. Good night, and enjoy a movie this weekend if you can. Take care.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Hey, I think we're still here. Hey, enjoy the next movie that you see.